Welcome to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. Each week, Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Londy explore the moments, questions, and ideas that shape who we are and who we aspire to be. And now for this week's conversation.
Welcome back to In Such a Time. I'm here with Rabbi Londy and Rabbi Jaffe, and today we wanted to invite our listeners into a discussion or a debate that seems to be happening within the Jewish intellectual world, and something I'm very much attuned with, and has to do with two seemingly disconnected things that happened over the past week, but seem to be responding to one another and offering a debate. And so I thought we'd bring it here to the listeners. I'd like to hear what you, Rabbi, have to say about this as well. So I'll just set this up for a moment. I think the first one, which is probably the best known, is that there was an anti-Semitism ad in the Super Bowl. Did you watch the Super Bowl this year?
I did.
You did. Did you like the Bad Bunny performance?
I did actually. I did a lot.
Yeah, it was great. There was an advertisement. It was paid by Robert Kraft. I think it was $15 million. And there was a real debate around both the efficacy and the messaging of that advertisement. There was even, I don't know if you've seen, but there is a AI version update response of what people think the ad should have looked like, and we can speak about that in a moment. And then similarly, the Sunday before, there was the annual State of World Jewry address at the 92nd Y, and Bret Stephens, who has spoken here at our synagogue, gave a pretty provocative speech that seemed to echo some of the same critiques of the Super Bowl ad. So let's start there, and then we can get to maybe Bret Stephens' response, and then hear like where we are between us. So I think that for some who viewed the advertisement, and I'm assuming many of our listeners have, but maybe some have not, the basic ad is of a Jewish kid in high school, goes to his locker. There's a Post-it note that says "Dirty Jew" on it. His non-Jewish friend comes by, puts a blue square on top of that one, sort of a blue symbol against Jew hatred. His friend is African American, and so says to him, "I've got you. We know what it's like," or some statement of solidarity.
Yeah, we're in it together, something like that.
Yeah, and the two of them face forward, and that's the end of the ad. And some of the criticism has been that, first of all, the word "dirty Jew" is something that has not been said about Jews maybe since the 1950s or 1960s. But if like an old man was paying $15 million, maybe he would say "dirty Jew" in it. But really, that's not as relevant to how Jews are being targeted. But the real criticism is that it is a weak, victimized Jew who is then saved by his stronger, resilient, non-Jewish friend, who comes in and speaks of their mutual vulnerability.
Yeah.
And
as if we can't save ourselves.
Right. That the message is, and actually, I get this part of the ad, that the ad is overwhelmingly for a non-Jewish audience.
Yeah.
I would guess to say that more non-Jews than Jews watch the Super Bowl. Yes, I think it's fair to say. And I think the implied message, I think the intent is to say that anti-Semitism is on par with other forms of hatred, just like racism towards African Americans or other minorities, because I think the assumption is that many people do not see Jews as vulnerable in the same way as African Americans, LGBTQ, Asian Americans, Latino, etc. And in it, the African American friend of the Jewish student basically says, "I know what it's like," and says that we're in the same boat together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But still projects Jewish victimhood and weakness in a way that I think makes others very uncomfortable. So let's just start with you. I've been talking a lot here. You watched the Super Bowl. You probably knew the ad was coming.
Yeah, I heard about the ad.
Well, what'd you think?
I've seen a lot of ads for ending anti-Semitism, or Jew hatred, and in some ways that's, it's comforting when something that is in existence is called out in the public stage. Like, this is not just something that Jews think is happening to them. This is happening, and let's all call it what it is. It's Jew hatred, it's anti-Semitism. It's a scary moment to be Jewish in America, and let's identify that. On the other hand, it's also in some ways playing into anti-Semitism. Like you're giving it, you're
Stereotypes.
giving, yeah, but you're also giving oxygen to to the fire of anti-Semitism. And that kind of brings us to Bret Stephens and what he presented. And what Bret Stephens presented the 92nd Street Y was essentially, and jump into, please add, that you we have to stop trying to fight anti-Semitism. You can't fight hatred. The only way to actually fight hatred is to just lean into being you, is to lean into being Jewish. That is the actual only way to do that. And it was interesting to hear that, because I actually taught a text from Martin Buber this past week in an adult ed class, and it was about self understanding, and to understand that the only person that you can actually change and that you have any effect on in this world is yourself. And by changing yourself and by being authentic and true to who you are and strong in who you are, that creates change in the world. But that's the only person that you can actually change. And so all of these campaigns that are going out to fight anti-Semitism, are they for naught? What are we actually doing, and can we actually fight anti-Semitism? Should we fight anti-Semitism, or should we just lean into being more Jewish in the serious, ritualized, cultural ways that we know how to be?
Right. I would say even more than that. I think that Bret Stephens begins by saying that money spent fighting anti-Semitism is wasted money,
Yeah.
and we should invest in our own institutions and our own selves. That a 3,000-year-old hatred is not going to go away due to better PR, basically. But then he went even further than that to say that if Jews are being excluded from spaces in polite public life, then Jews should, as he says, build your own table if you don't have your own seat at someone else's table, and that we should create many, many, many more Jewish day schools. We should, really withdraw from the public school system if public schools and their teachers' unions espouse racist thoughts towards Jews or hateful thoughts towards anyone connected to Israel. That we should really erase ourselves somewhat from larger, broader, multi-denominational Jewish, multinational life, and that we should focus on just building up our own. And he even, in the conversation afterwards, talks about Israel as an example of this. I thought it was fascinating. A lot of American Jews spend a lot of time worrying and wishing that Israel had better PR and explained itself better. And Stevens is basically saying that, look, Israel has concluded that no one's going to like this country anyway. And so you might as well build up the best intellectual institutions and universities and military and economy and technology. And if no one wants to play with you, then you can just build your own. And then others, if they wish to at that point, can, but that's not really the point. And I do worry about this balance between prioritizing Jewish needs, not needing to explain ourselves, and withdrawing from the larger world around us and making the Jewish community more insular. I think that causes me to pause.
But that's been the ebb and flow of the Jewish experience. It's so interesting when you're living at a historical trend.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we, for whatever reason, maybe it's arrogance or ignorance or disbelief, like we somehow, I convinced myself that I'm not, like, how could, after the Holocaust, like we're done with all the things that we should be done with. Like there's no more, there shouldn't really actually be anti-Semitism, and Jews are safe. And then the ebb and flow of Jewish history is, yeah, this is the trend, and the way that the Jews have responded to it is we realized that we were othered, and then we went back to being more Jewish, and more specifically and particularly Jewish. And then when we felt that we were safe, we leaned more into the universalist values. And that's just, it's just the dance of the centuries.
It's funny. I was talking to my 8th and 9th grade class about this last night. I was using them as a bit of a guinea pig for this discussion as well. And I asked them if anyone knew about Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. And some of the kids said, yeah, I was even born there. said, why is there a hospital in New York City named after Mount Sinai? Isn't that weird?
Mm.
And they had no idea. And I explained to them that there was a certain time in which it was hard for Jewish doctors, physicians to get jobs and roles at hospitals, and the Jews weren't always treated the same in hospitals. And so the Jews built their own hospital, and it became one of the best hospitals. And then other people wanted to be there too. And then, of course, I said, what about, have you heard of Brandeis University? Same exact story, right? We're going to make our own university. If there's going to be quotas in the Ivy Leagues, we're going to build our own Ivy League, and eventually it's going to ascend. And what's interesting is that is so far removed from our students' history. They don't even know that Mount Sinai has Jewish origins, and they don't know about quotas and the idea that there would be universities that would be less welcoming to Jews, so we're going to build our own. If you look at Brandeis now, Brandeis struggles to attract Jewish students.
I know, it's so wild.
Which is, and I think what you're seeing again is this ebb and flow, as you're saying, and that maybe we are moving into a period of time where our younger Jews in 21st century America are going to act a lot more like Jews at the beginning of the 20th century and less like how you and I grew up.
Can I tell you about a conversation I had last night?
Yeah, please.
I met with our confirmation students, and I walked away with it really moved.
It's a great group.
Besides the fact that it's a great group, a shout out to Confirmation 2026. It was the things that they were talking about and the way that they thought about themselves in the world was so Jewishly focused, not even as a response to anti-Semitism, but just as a desire to be more authentically themselves. And I was really, really surprised by their answers as to why they were participating in confirmation. And they said being Jewish is a core element of who they are, and they want to be more informed and thoughtful in ritual, spiritual, and cultural ways about their Judaism. And they're looking as a starting point for their college exploration, thinking about where it's going to not just be where Jews going to be safe. A few said that, but where is it going to be a good Jewish experience? And I just thought, even a few years ago when I started here before October 7th, and it's weird that we have to situate ourselves pre and post, that conversation was different with those teens. They were proud about being Jewish. And then after October 7th, there was a reaction to anti-Semitism. And now we're at a moment where it's less reactionary and more just rooted in this is who we are. And our parents made decisions so that we could be Jewish, and our grandparents made decisions so we could be Jewish. So we want to keep doing that. And it was just really thoughtful, and it didn't feel like I was talking to 15 and 16-year-olds. I just felt like I just was very hopeful about our future after spending time with them.
I remember feeling a similar schism when we went to speak with when our older daughter was a senior in high school, and the beginning of the fall you go and talk to the guidance counselor about possible colleges.
Yeah.
And the prism, the lens by which she was evaluating schools and the ones that our family was evaluating schools, they had nothing to do with each other. That her first was, well, look at the GPA, look at the SAT score, look at the extracurriculars, where, big school, small school, where can she achieve? And we came in with the primary question being, where is my kid going to be safe? And a lot of the places that she would suggest to us, mostly small liberal arts Northeast schools, were places that we did not feel safe sending our daughter. And then I thought about wanting to keep her within driving distance just in case things happened at the university that she wouldn't be remote. The guidance counselor had not caught up to where we were. We had not had caught up to them. And there was this unspoken gap, crater between us around what worlds that we were living in and what by what factors we were evaluating our choices.
Yeah, I can kind of only just sigh. It's when Bret Stephens, I listened to a podcast that he did with Dan Senor, speaking about his talk, and he was saying that he didn't know how it would land telling Jews to stop fighting anti-Semitism. And he said that many Jewish leaders have reached out to him saying, we've been thinking
Yeah.
about this for a long time.
Yes.
And we don't think that an effective Jewish identity is anti-Semitism.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, you also really spoke about this on the high holidays, and in some ways I spoke about it too. What do you think comes from Bret Stephens' charge to the Jewish people at this moment? Like what are the next steps? What are the how-tos?
I'll say the things that resonated most deeply with me, coming from a rabbinic perspective, I think he's really challenging Jews to learn about, invest in their own Judaism. He calls out Jews for whom the last significant ritual event for them was their bar bat mitzvah 20, 30, 40 years ago. Jews who feel either ashamed of Israel or ashamed of their own lack of knowledge. And I think that, just to bring this back to our opening example of the Super Bowl ad, in the AI response Super Bowl ad, they do it's very intentional that the same student is pictured with a kippah on with his family observing Shabbat.
Yeah.
And that's something that's missing from the original ad. So I think on the spiritual component, I completely get that. When it comes to the political, here's my worry. Let's say, great, all Jews turn inward and we stop any of our advocating for, against anti-Semitism. The ADL goes away altogether. There was a lot of consternation around. He's calling it out specifically as
Right.
unnecessary. Most of the laws in this country are debated and passed by non-Jewish people. And so if we leave that arena, that means that we won't be able to advocate and there will be others making laws without us. And similarly, most university educators and administrators are not Jewish. And so again, if we withdraw, we are ceding the discussion to all of them. This is a very similar, by the way, again, when I was applying to college, there was a big debate. Do you withdraw from certain schools that have become less welcoming to Jews, especially connected to Israel? Or are you advocating and do you want to say that, no, we should send more students to Columbia? We should send more students to Harvard because we shouldn't be ceding our ground on that. I do worry about that. And I know that for a lot of, at least when I was growing up, my generation, Gen X, there was something with the 20th century success story of American Jews had so much to do with public schools, with public school integration, um, with having established relationships with non-Jews through the public schools. There was such a pride around public schools. And as someone who admittedly did not grow up going to public school, in Hawaii, the public schools they were really, really problematic, and not just being Jewish or white. They're really, really terrible reputation. But I was proud to send my kids to public school here. Then again, it's not like there's such great economic diversity in Chappaqua public schools, right? You're kind of self-selecting, and so that it is kind of one big, giant, almost private school when you consider the taxes. But yeah, I worry about the abandonment, the abdication of our seat at the table, because if we're not there, there are going to be decisions made about us, whether we like it or not.
Maybe it's not an all or nothing equation. Maybe it's not we're there or we're not there, but maybe we're a little bit less there, a little bit less fighting the fight against anti-Semitism. Like when I'm speaking to somebody and they define their Judaism by anti-Semitism, like what's the most important thing about you being Jewish? Well, the Jew we're hated and anti-Semitism. Well, that's not an identity. Your identity, in my opinion, should not be I exist against something else. What do you exist for? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? It's really interesting to me when I ask someone when I ask a student to talk to me from our community, what it means for them to be Jewish. Like the things that they talk about that are meaningful for them are experiential, usually positive experiences. Hopefully we're going to be adding like some academic text study based, connecting them a little bit more to the past, not just towards the last century. But I think that, so when Bret Stephens is saying that, I think it's because the way that the Jews have survived is by continuing to be seriously Jewish. That's that's the way that we've done it, not by fighting the Crusades, not by fighting the Inquisition, by literally holding on to ourselves, secretly, audaciously, like in all the ways that we did, by holding on to our true identities and being knowledgeable. I mean, no one can take education away from you. No one can take knowledge away from you. No one can take experiences away from you. Um, so I think that it's not we get rid of anti-Semitism, I'm sorry, I mean the fight against anti-Semitism, but we don't prioritize that as the core of our existence.
I think that often the devil's in the details. Again, here we go back to like policy versus emotion again. But what do we do as Reformed Jewish leaders with something like, let's say, intermarriage? Do we start telling our congregants that we think that marrying a fellow Jew should be prioritized over a non-Jew?
Well, what do you
And
think?
hold on, what do we do to the dozens and dozens of amazing non-Jewish spouses at the synagogue, many of whom are the spiritual tone setters of their household and who contribute, participate in Jewish life on par or more than their Jewish? Sometimes it's the non-Jew dragging the Jew by the ear, come here to the synagogue. Do you actually start saying that? Because that was part of Bret Stephens' address. And if I think the facts are something like 90% of the children of interfaith couples themselves marry, someone of another faith, and that ultimately there's this fear about dilution through generations, then is that something that people are going to start talking about? Or at what point does that mean that as rabbis, we should begin to create expectations and standards of Jewish observance and Jewish knowledge? I'm just saying that this, I think that we have succeeded so much through the spirit of inclusivity and a big tent. And when you start saying that, no, actually, we should be emphasizing our particularistic aspects of Judaism, I don't think you can do both at the same time, or you have to be really, really careful about how you do that.
I agree with you fully on that. I think that that's perhaps the downfall in some ways of liberal Judaism, is that you want to be so inclusive that you don't set standards and then, well, what do you stand for?
Right.
And I think that the trend is that there is no really third generation reform continuity, or fourth generation reform continuity. When it just, as you said, when it becomes diluted, it doesn't sound good the way I'm saying it, but when you keep marrying outside of the faith and don't hold on to the core values of Jewish life, then it will be lost. And then you ask another question, like, what do you do about the incredibly supportive non-Jewish spouses in these families? I think that it's not you do this or you do that. I think you have to do both at the same time and say, we're so happy that you're with us. Thank you so much for making your families richly Jewish and caring about their spiritual health. And saying to our teens, you know what, it's worth considering the people who you are going to, who you're going to marry. You want to have joint values. You want to think about not telling them what they have to do, because I know that Reform Judaism has an allergy to doing that, but saying maybe this is worth considering because this is what your life will look like if you choose this, and this is what your life will look like if you choose that. And there's also many other options that we don't know. I think it's a really, really interesting question. What do you think? Like personally, what do you think? Like, do you feel comfortable telling our youth that they should consider marrying Jewish spouses?
It's interesting. I mean, you look, I don't know what your confirmation class, I'm thinking about it now, but in my 8th and 9th grade class, there are like several of the most outspoken, most dedicated students in the class are children of intermarriage.
Right. Incredibly Jewish kids.
And here they are, and there are other kids who maybe become bar bat mitzvah, and we don't see them again at the synagogue ever. And who am I to sort of lecture them or tell them about their experience?
True.
And so I really struggle with this. maybe we could do an entire separate thing just about intermarriage, and we can be very careful around that and think about that some more.
I love that.
I wanna let's park on that for now. I want to tell you, we're having this little internal debate, and it was touched on by this by both the commercial and then the Bret Stephens address. So I went to this very like prominent private school in Hawaii. It's the one where Obama went to as well. It's sort of like this like if you go to my high school, it looks like a college. Like it's ridiculous. And I have friends there who are now involved in faculty. I have a friend who's on the board of the high school. In Hawaii, there is great animosity towards Israel, and there culturally, and there is a great identification by locals with Palestinians, and seeing Zionists like the white missionaries who came in and who took the island from the indigenous people. I was thinking about reaching out to my friend and saying, who's on the board, and saying, you don't need to, but if you ever wanted to, um, I'd be happy to zoom in with your high school,
Or they can fly you out.
global, yeah, sure, their global studies class. And if you ever wanted to have someone talk to the kids who is a proud Zionist and can also speak to it from a cultural backdrop of knowing Hawaiian history as well, be happy to come in. Then I think to myself, why do I want to give myself this headache? This is even if I was able to convince, 10, 15 of them that, Zionists aren't the devil, that's out of a population of 1 million in Hawaii. And should I be spending my time and my effort on combating anti-Semitism if it's a drop in the ocean, or is it not worth the headache of like the mental toil, the emotional toil that's going to mean for me? And so I wonder what that is. This is about the turn inward. Like, should I stop trying to explain myself to other people and like making them wanting them to like me or to understand me?
Has that been a fruitful pursuit in other places regarding anti-Semitism? Like when you've done that online or when you've done that in relationship with people in Chappaqua, Pleasantville, has that been fruitful trying to explain yourself?
I think some yes, some no. I think that online usually no. And I usually don't try to do that online as well. I think that's a waste of time. But I think that like in all things in life, it's based on relationship, and you have to have that long-lasting relationship and trust with someone to know that you're actually, seeing them as the equal and you're taking their arguments seriously and not just as the other person's talking, thinking about the best way to rebut them, which is often the case. So, yeah, there's been some. More often it's a pain. I think I've told you the story before, but years ago, I was in San Francisco, living there, and in Mill Valley, north of San Francisco, in Marin, just north of Golden Gate Bridge, there is this wonderful trail. It's called the Dipsea Trail, and it's got this staircase going up the mountain. And at the top of the mountain, hidden in the forest, is a beer garden on this amazing like patio looking out over all of the forest. It's one of the most beautiful places you can go to. You can hike up there, you can drive there, you can sit there and drink like a stein of like really good beer. And it was a
Sounds
gorgeous day. And I hiked up there with a friend. We're sitting there on the porch and we're looking out, and then over there to the left somewhere, two guys are talking, and I overhear one guy saying, well, the Jews treat the Arabs just like the Nazis treated the Jews. And now, right, now I have this decision to make is like, I'm having such a nice day. Like, this ruins my day. Do I have to put down my beer and go and now insert myself and try to like right the ship with this guy?
You were like, hold my beer.
Yeah, exactly. Or can I just let it go and just enjoy my day because like, what does he mean to me anyway? Now, you knowing me, you know that I had no choice in this whatsoever. 2 hours later, sitting with this guy,
there's no choice.
I couldn't help it. But
Wait, 2 hours later, I want to know what happened.
I don't remember. Maybe I got a couple points in. I don't remember.
But you had a conversation with them?
Oh yeah. I walked right up and said, like, what you're saying is so offensive and so historically inaccurate.
Okay, so
yeah.
I actually think that that's a really important point what you're making right now, because you're not, I don't think you're going to win the fight against anti-Semitism by having ads and by making huge statements. But I do think that what you did is creating a connection and putting a face and having a conversation that is transformative.
Yes, but as my wife likes to say, am I sweeping the ocean? Am I just like trying to clean up and just it's like it's a drop in the bucket? Like am I actually making a difference in the world? This is one guy, one conversation.
I
And
don't know. That's kind of how the world works. It's one conversation.
I appreciate that. So when it comes to the example of my high school, that would be me like actively seeking out that dialogue versus it being right in my face. So this is why I'm thinking of it. But it comes back to that same discussion of how much energy do we want to spend advocating for ourselves with others who either don't understand or are opposed to what we stand for, or do you just circle the wagons and say, the rest of the world? I remember being a Jewish summer camp counselor and feeling like my bunk, all I care about is my bunk. The rest of camp can burn down. I shouldn't say that because the camp did burn down,
Oh
but
my God.
not that
You
same summer.
did.
Not that yes, I'm not the arsonist here, but just be like, this is my ADA, this is my bunk, and I'm gonna focus on these 15 kids. They're gonna have the best time of their life, and I don't have time for the rest of camp, and whatever happens out there happens. Which, by the way, is often what I think about with our synagogue and the larger Reform slash Jewish world is I just want to focus all my energy on Temple Bethel. And here we have these families who are giving their time and resources and funds towards our synagogue, and they deserve 100% of our attention. So I do have this like knee-jerk like trend towards particularism and towards being more insular. And I worry about that because I do worry about the negative effects.
Well, I think that what you've done in Chappaqua, and I think you've really been a teacher for me in that way, is there were clear trends of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel rhetoric in the school system, in relationships between neighbors. And what I really thought was beautiful is the way that this community, specifically you, really leaned on those strong relationships that you had built. And you called people out, I don't think in a way that was shameful. I think in a way that was bridge building.
Mhm.
Like, that hurts. When you speak this way about Jews or about Israel, or where you alienate me, or where you don't include me in the conversation, that hurts, and that hurts Jews. And I think that that is an effective way. And it's an effective way of doing both of those things, of saying, I'm proud to be Jewish. I'm standing up for myself. And I'm calling you out where I think you might have a blind spot.
I appreciate and thank you for the very kind compliment. I think something that we do also very well here is that we are doing our best to equip our students with the vocabulary, the information that they are able to speak about this. Because what often happens is a student enters into a college campus and that student is unable to speak back when someone is making audacious claims about Jews or Israel. We're trying to do our best to do that. Let me just take a second and go to the second ad because we haven't really explained it to people here. So in the rebuttal ad to the Super Bowl ad, the Jewish kid gets the dirty Jew comment on his backpack. It shows him there continuing his studies. It shows him growing up. He's studying science. He's graduating. He's celebrating Shabbat at home. He's getting married. He becomes a researcher and a scientist and a doctor. Eventually, it looks like he's doing some sort of like brain scanning of some sort. And eventually, he is working with a patient and looking at an X-ray or MRI of that patient, doing some sort of a new technology that he seems to be on the cutting edge. And the patient turns out to be the kid who put the dirty Jew tag on his backpack. And now instead he says, thank you. And so some things about this, I like the idea of the Jew now. What happens? He sticks up for himself. He pushes himself intellectually. He becomes a man. He eventually brings good into the world. Here's my fear of this one. I think it plays into another tired trope, which is to say, oh, you don't like Israel? Well, you should probably give back your cell phone, and you probably don't want to use Waze, and you probably, don't want to use grape tomatoes and drip irrigation and polio vaccines because Israel made them all. As if to say that Israel's technological advancements give it license to do anything in the world ethically, and so we can't judge it that way. And so maybe for me that's just that's my own little my little sensitivity there. But did you see that second ad, or how does that sound to you?
I did.
Yeah.
I think it's I just didn't I'm having a hard time finding my words for it. I'm kind of sick of just finding new narratives and like creating new narratives. Just be Jewish. Just live life. Just do the things that make you Jewish in a way that is thoughtful and authentic to you. It's wonderful when Jews persevere and overcome and are, lead industry as a response. Like those are wonderful, wonderful responses. And I feel really proud of my students and in my people, all of it. But it also, that's not representative of everybody. It's not representative. I just feel like it's another trope. And I'm not sure what purpose it serves. I've been thinking about the dual narrative of the diasporic Jew and the Israeli Jew. And the Israeli Jew took the narrative of victimhood and said that's disgusting and we don't accept it, and we now fight for ourselves and we persevere and we reject that. And the diasporic Jew says we're always going to be visitors in a land, and we're victims, and we're going to be persecuted. And I think that now we're coming to a point where maybe perhaps diasporic Jews not living in the land of Israel, maybe were turned off by the Israeli narrative of we persevere. And I think I said in the past. And I think now we're getting to a moment where we also don't want to see ourselves as victims. It gets old, but there has to and I don't think we need to see ourselves as either one of those. I know that narratives are really important for the stories that we tell ourselves and how we pass things on from one generation to the next. But I'm not sure that either one of those serve us as a way to lead our lives. I don't know. I need something else, something between those two.
So I'll posit this as an example. I think a way forward. I think that much more effective than the ad of the African-American kid helping out and standing up for the Jewish kid as he gets the dirty Jew thing put on his backpack. Rabbi, do you ever watch Pardon the Interruption on ESPN? The sports commentary show.
No, I don't.
Okay. This show's, I think some of our listeners have. This show's been going for 25 years at least.
What's it called?
Pardon the Interruption. And the entire show are two guys. An old Jewish guy named Tony Kornheiser debating with his very good friend, fellow journalist, columnist, Michael Wilbon, African-American. The absolute love they have for one another, the complete respect, empathy, kindness that they show to one another. It is the most I've thought about this a lot. It's the most beautiful relationship, an authentic thing that I think we see on TV. You don't normally think that on a half-hour sports commentary show, but when things happen in our world, like after 9/11, like the Black Lives Matter movement, like October the 7th, there is they don't talk politics on the show, but they clearly care so much about each other and about their families and who they are. It is the most beautiful bromance out there of these two aging journalists from of the 20th century, the best you could consider. And it's everything that we want those relationships to be like in a way that is so much more authentic than a 30-second or 15-second ad can possibly show. And I think I think it would be a mistake if we were to move away from those relationships and investing in relationships. When we had here Omer Shem Tov speak at our synagogue, the former hostage, And Merle McJunkin, the Reverend from Antioch Baptist Church, who was a good friend, not just came, sat in the front row, asked him questions about it. There is like a genuine relationship. I think that we have to be all in on relationship building. I think that, to Bret Stephens' point, I think we have the ability and the standing to step away from those who are just going to cause us harm or frustration, there's no relationship available there. But I think that investing in relationships is more important now than ever.
I mean, in my opinion, that's the only sacred work. I mean, really, the whole point of everything is about building relationships and having connection and cultivating that. And I think that maybe that's been part of the break of this moment, is that connections that we thought were solid aren't, and we're understanding that we're needing to look for new connections and in different places. Yeah.
I remember when the Black Lives Matter national movement put anti-Israel language into their platform, that Merle and I went out for lunch together and we talked about it. And about 6 months ago, Merle and I sat down for lunch and had a long talk all around DEI and the way it lands on segments of both the African American and the Jewish community, and yet the need to pursue diversity and inclusion. And it was I'm so glad to have a friend like that I can be vulnerable with, and can also hear him being vulnerable with me. And I think that that's what we have to champion. I think that's the way forward.
Do you think that that's what the ad was saying, is that we should have these relationships and we just have to be allies with one another?
You know what? I think that, like any artist project, it's in the eye of the beholder, of the receiver. I certainly like that. I mean, clearly in that advertisement, we have to assume that the African American and the Jewish kid are not meeting for the first time.
Yeah.
And there is some built up trust that would make them want to do that for one another. And so maybe that's a good place for us to land.
I'm very, I often end my words here with hope. So I'm hopeful that two things are going to happen. Number one, that there's going to be a trend of just really leaning into figuring out what our Jewish identity means on many levels. And also realizing that the only way to enact any change in the world is to be honest with ourselves, and then to create meaningful relationships from those places of honesty.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thanks for joining us on In Such a Time. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Londy, or to connect with Temple Bethel of Northern Westchester, visit bethelnw.org, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Temple Bethel NW. Thanks for listening.